Welcome, everybody. A question that I get asked a lot as a high priestess is how do spells work and how can a person improve their spell work? So today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 keys to spell work. And so whether you are brand new to writing your own spells or you've been writing spells for decades and performing them, there's something for everybody in this episode tonight. So welcome, merry meet. I'm Aislin and this is Ask Aislin. So if you are here with me live, feel free to put comments and questions in the chat and I will answer those as we're going through, and I'll also do a Q&A at the end. I'm also having some issues with the microphone today. So if you are on here live, if anybody can just give me a thumbs up or say that they can hear this, I just wanted to make sure the microphone is going through correctly. Leave a heart or a thumbs up if you're watching this, you like what you're hearing. It just helps us get the feed into other people. And if you are watching this later on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, so you will be updated on our latest videos. So I'm just going to dive right in with our keys to spell work. Hi, everybody. Hi, Elaine and Misty, Danielle, Lori. We got a lot of people joining us. And I'm going to dive right into key number 1. So before I jump into those 10 keys, though, I do want to. Danielle said it's breaking up a bit. I hope you guys can hear it. Misty said it's working okay. Okay. All right. I hope it's working. I do want to let you know that tonight I am not really covering the mechanics of spell work. I will cover that in a future episode. And I also want to let you know, if you want to take all of this to a greater depth, I will be sharing more at the end about my course, Demystifying and Deepening Witchcraft, that is coming out soon. But let's dive right into key number 1. Okay, number 1, first, know thyself. Okay, so I'm going to go through what each of these means, and then for anybody who's here who is live, you can always let me know if you have some questions or some comments about this particular one or anything in general for the Q&A at the end. So know thyself. So the first key to spell work is one that is kind of unexpected for people. People think that it's all about the tools and the intentions and all of that, but the very, very beginning of all of your spell work is in your mind. And so it's important that you know yourself. So self-improvement is a common goal of most spiritual systems. So if you look at spiritual systems throughout different religions and cultures, you will find that there is an element of self-improvement to most of those systems. So the most important thing that you can do for your own magical training is learn more about yourself and who you are. So we ourselves will often be the biggest limit to our spell work and to our power and our potential as magicians and magical workers. So the main point of our magical training really should be in the beginning, to clear out any blocked channels that might be keeping us from reaching that truest potential that we have. So here are 3 of the best things that you can do along these lines. Is number 1, engage in some type of an energy practice. So this will not only help you release any energetic blockages that you might have, but it also will help you understand better how to move energy, how to move it inside of your body from one place to another, how to move it from outside of you into you, how to move it from inside of you to outside of you. And that in itself is going to be one of the biggest things that you can possibly do. So if you're not already doing and engaged in some kind of energetic practice, that would be the first thing I would add in. So number 2 along these lines is working with, in particular, with the solar plexus. Now I'll talk a little bit about that later in a different key, but at least for this one, our solar plexus will help us increase our belief in our abilities, both mundane and magical. So self-belief is an issue for a lot of people. So every once in a while, I post a question inside of the Body, Mind, Witchcraft group that asks people what is the number 1 thing that is holding them back from their magical abilities or from their intuition or anything like that. And multiple people, large portions of people, hey, we have a cat fight here. Sorry about that. Multiple people will tell me that their self-belief or something having to do with their belief is one of the things that really, really holds them back. So we know that this is a big issue for a lot of people. So number two, I would be working with the solar plexus in particular. That will help with your self-belief, and a little bit more about that later. And then number three, finding some kind of self-actualization, self-development program that you can work through. Shadow work is a very accessible one for many witches. This is why witches really like the idea of shadow work, because it is so tied to the things that we're already doing. But if we can find something that will help us figure out who we are better and our own blockages and get those cleared out of the way, that is our first key to spell work. All right, so key number two. Key number two is about changes in the etheric plane. So this one says changes in the etheric plane manifest as changes in the physical world. So what this means is that any act that we create in the etheric plane has the potential to manifest in the physical world. Has the potential. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Why doesn't everything in the etheric plane just simply manifest? So here we have this idea of as above, so below, as within, so without. So wherever our energies are in the macrocosm, they will also be in the microcosm and vice versa. So during our spell work, our mind must connect to that etheric plane. Sometimes people call this the quantum sea. And all the possibilities exist in that quantum sea. And here, that is where we program our desire. So when we're doing our spell work, our magic, we're not here in this world, we're between the worlds. Anybody who's come to my rituals will know I say that a lot. Like, we're creating space in between the worlds because that's where our magic is really taking place. So the deal is that if you can imagine it, you can manifest it somewhere, and that there is a caveat with that. So to manifest it in the physical world, it does have to in some way follow the laws of physics here in the earthly plane. So for example, flying, as far as a human being goes, is not possible in the physical world, at least according to the physics that we know of the earth. But flying can be done in other dimensions and can be done in lucid dreaming and in astral travel. So we can manifest anything out there, but we want to manifest something in this world. We just need to make sure that it's following the physical laws of this universe. So that would be our key number two. So anything that you can imagine can be made possible. That is very true. It can be made possible somewhere. All right, key number three. It takes great energy to manifest physical changes. Okay, so let's talk about this. It takes great energy to manifest physical changes. So the magical outcome is often directly proportional to the effort that we put in. And there's a couple of different ways we can break this down and look at it. So the more that you put in, generally, the more you get out. And we can look at this from several different angles. So our effort can absolutely be mental or energetic. And the amount of effort and time that we put in are indirectly proportional to one another. So what that means is if you put in more effort, you probably will need less time for the spell. And if you put in more time, you may need less effort for the spell. So what this means is if we have a really big working, like some workings are quite large, especially if we are trying to affect biology and things like that. So when those efforts are really large, we may need more time than other spells. Now, it also depends on what you're trying to affect, whether you're trying to just affect you or you're trying to affect an outcome that will influence some other people as well. So if you have a lot of unchecked self-doubt, so coming back to that idea again, you may have to put in a lot more time and effort than other people who don't have quite as much self-doubt. Now, if it's a really big working, like I said, like something that's going to affect biology or is going to affect groups of people, you may be better off if you do that and you break that into chunks and you do it at different times. And do smaller workings over an extended period of time. You may have more success when your working is really big. So if you do a magical working and you find that it didn't work, this is always something that you can consider. Could I have broken that down into smaller pieces? I can always go back and try again. Perhaps break it down and do it over 7 days, or break it down and do it over an entire lunar cycle or several cycles. Perhaps 3, full moons, you do that spell 3 different times, and that's going to compound the energy. Now that leads us to key number 4. Now, in key number 4, magic requires 4 things. It requires intent, it requires visualization. I'm going to explain a little bit about that one because I have some issues with this one, visualization. But it requires intent, visualization, energy, and then some form of release. So let's talk a bit about the intent. Intent is probably the most important thing that you need when you're first starting out. It's important that we state out loud the intent of the working. So this can be done even in a whisper, even if you just say, this magical working is for the intent of bringing in self-love, even if you whisper that. So there's a couple reasons why. So number 1, when we speak, even if it's in a whisper, we immediately activate the throat chakra in a way that we don't quite do when we're speaking inside of our heads. Now, the throat chakra is one of 2 creative centers in the body, and it is required to help us manifest. It helps us connect to the spirit element, that element that's outside of all the other elements and creates them. So speaking or even whispering those words can be important because at least it activates that throat chakra and you have that starting and working during the spell. Now, number 2, speaking out loud also helps other spirits around you, spirits that you're trying to draw in, perhaps aid or help from, like deities, elementals, other spirit guides, things like that. It helps them know what is the intent. So what I have found through leading circles for 10 plus years is that when spells didn't work for people, it often had to do with the fact that the intention was not very clear. So the less clear we make the intention, the less clear that result is going to be. So to me, the very beginning of spell work is spending some time figuring out exactly what it is you want, honing that down into a sentence that's very clear and concise and doesn't have any confusion in it. And that can actually very much amplify and accelerate your magic just by doing that one thing. Now, the second component to after intent is visualization. Now, here I've got a few issues with this because I know there's a lot of people who have trouble visualizing. So because magic manifests through the etheric plane, our visualization is important. Now, that plane, when we can visualize the outcome on that plane that we desire, we're more likely to manifest it in this one. But visualization is difficult for about a third of the population. It may even be larger than that. Some of you know that I've worked as an educational therapist in my muggle job. And one of the things I did years ago, I teach the higher level students now, but I used to teach little kids how to read. And we had little kids who had trouble comprehending. And they could read fluently, but they just couldn't remember anything they were reading, or it was just like it was going in one ear and out the other. And there was this program that I was trained in that I would implement and teach these kids, and it was all about visualization. So you would teach the kids how to visualize pictures first, and then you move to things that don't have pictures. And honestly, the program didn't really work very well. We were very, very good at being able to teach the kids how to read. So if they came in and they were mixing up letters or they couldn't memorize sight words, we were very good at teaching the kids how to do that. But when they came in and they could read and they couldn't visualize, honestly, the program didn't work. The company who created the program, they wanted to say it worked. But from my experience as a clinician and a consultant working at that firm, I don't think it worked. And here's why. I think that there's a third of the population. I really do believe this. There's some studies that have shown this that just have trouble visualizing. So if you are one of those people, it's okay. Your magic still absolutely can work. You don't have to visualize during meditation, and you don't have to visualize during the spell work either. So what I would suggest mostly is don't get really caught up on the idea that this has to be this crystal clear, perfect vision that you're creating in your mind. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be an intention that you can somehow focus on in your mind. So if you can focus on the words, if you can create a symbol, so suppose that you are trying to draw in love, to use that example again. And so rather than seeing yourself with the partner and seeing all the things you're going to do, like some of the spells might call for you to do, that might be difficult if you have trouble visualizing. So instead you could visualize a symbol, a heart. It might be easier to visualize that. But if anything, just trying to focus on the intent That's the important thing. It's just the focus in the etheric plane. So that leads us to the third part. So we got intent, visualization, and now we have energy. We got to do something with energy here when we're doing a spell. So raising energy is going to be a critical component of your spell work. So this can be done in your own body. You can simply raise it. You can draw in energy from your root chakra. You can pull it up through all your energetic centers. You can hold it in a certain space, like the throat chakra, or sometimes the third eye is where I like to hold it before letting it go, which is which is going to be the fourth component of this sequence. But you can also raise energy through physical means outside in the world too. So this could be chanting or singing. It could be clapping. It could be drumming. It could be some kind of noise that you're making. It could be dancing. It could be movement. Rubbing the palms together, or if you've come to a few of my rituals, I've taught the nail bed way of raising energy, which I think is one of the most effective ways, is just rub the nail beds together for about a minute. And you'll even feel that energy in your palms when you finally put them down in front of the object you're charging, or whatever you're doing with the energy. So we just need some way to raise that energy. And then once the energy is raised, we need a way to release it. So we can't just store the energy in the body. We've got to let it go. So I like to raise the energy. I like to draw it up into my third eye, hold it there. I even suspend my breath as I let it build up, build up, build up. And then I direct it out into the universe with the intention that it will reach the place where it's meant to reach. At that point, though, it's important that not only that we release the energy out into the universe, but we also release our connection to what we just did. So we really need to let go of it, because the problem is that many will say that they have trouble letting go. They kind of ruminate over the spell. Did it work? Did it not work? I wonder if I did this right. And all of that worry and that anxiety and that rumination and questioning, all of that can actually start to undo the energy you raised and the intention that you had. So many people will say, just try to forget about it. And in fact, the part of the witch's pyramid that says to be silent, there's many interpretations of that, but one interpretation is this very thing, is let it go. Let it go. Don't talk about it. Don't think about it. Don't worry about it. So if you can't forget about it, so let's say you can't forget about it and you're ruminating on it, I understand, I get it. You just want to try to tell yourself to just let it go, let it roll off the shoulders. You can always go back and redo the spell. So that's also something you can tell yourself. If you're having trouble letting it go, just say, if it didn't work, I'll redo it next full moon, or I'll redo it in a week, or, a couple of days, or something like that. So, but that can be really important, just kind of letting that go. And I also recommend not talking to a lot of people about it unless they're supportive. Some people say don't talk to anybody about your magic, but I don't really feel that. I feel the people to not talk about it with are those who are very critical. I wouldn't talk to those people, because they're going to start being critical, and they may start to undo some of that, whatever you've created in your mind. So just be careful of who you talk to for that reason. And then I'm just pausing. I'm at key 5, but I'm just going to pause for a moment, just looking at the chat. And Danielle said she's been told her throat chakra is blocked, been trying to work on fixing that. The good news for Danielle is, in Shadow Seekers, the membership Shadow Seekers, we are absolutely going to be working on that throat chakra a lot. So, but for anybody, one of the things that you can do for the throat chakra, if you feel your throat chakra is blocked, is try to do sound, making sound, singing, chanting. This is one of the best things you can possibly do. I love the Brahmari breath. It's the bee's breath, where you just close your ears off and you take an inhale, and then you make this humming sound out. And you just do that several times. Very, very good for activating the throat chakra, and it's very good for anxiety as well. But there are other practices you can also use. The throat chakra is blocked for a lot of people, or it has blockages in it for a lot of people. So you're definitely not alone in that. All right, key number 5. Your unconscious mind can get in the way. So I say don't let it get in the way. So let's talk about that. Let's not let that get in the way. So magic starts first in the mind. So you will often see people who will say magic is only in the mind. In a lot of ways, that's true. The props and the different things that we use, the catalysts and things like that, they're meant to align our energy in a certain way. But at the end of the day, that magic is absolutely happening in your mind. This is our connection to the etheric plane and or the quantum seed, depending on what you call it. And this is part of what connects us truly to the unconscious self. Now, we can deliberately shape our reality if we want to, if we're very effective at working with that unconscious mind. So, any unresolved conflicts that we might have, any unresolved traumas we have, they don't always get in the way, but many of them can. And they can get in that way of our ability to channel our own magical energy. So, we may have to dig deep into the unconscious to try to figure out what some of those blockages are, where our saboteur is, that part of us that comes in and kind of wants to sabotage and undo that everything we've done. And this is where our shadow work can really come into play. So kind of revisiting that again, this is why shadow work is so important for us, because it clears the way for all these other things that we want to do in our magical practice. It's also important, I think, for us to explore the cultural idea that magic isn't real. It just exists in the collective. You know people in your life who would say that, who would laugh at what you do. And even if we say, I'm not fazed by that or affected by that, we can't help but be connected to the collective. So some of that is in the collective unconscious of us as well. So we don't know the level that these ideas are affecting us. And so for this reason, I think always visiting that idea of self-belief, working with the solar plexus can help us kind of shed some of that cultural idea that the magic's not real, intuition's not real, you can only believe what you can see, all that nonsense. um, all right, key number 6. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a second, so I'm doing these in real time. Lori said, does a negative thought unravel or ruin the spell? So I have a couple of thoughts on this. So I'm not sure if you're talking about your own negative thoughts or the negative thoughts of others, but I'll kind of address both. I don't think that it can ruin or unravel the spell. I don't think it helps. So I'm not going to say it necessarily ruins it, but it's definitely not going to help. So I think, though, if it's coming from other people, if you have your own self-belief strong, you are going to be likely to be able to combat whatever doubt is coming from other people. But Lori said it's coming from herself. So, it's not going to be helpful for you. So that's why we want to try to undo our limiting beliefs and like our thoughts about, like, if we have thoughts of me not being worthy of this, of what I'm calling or asking for, obviously that's going to get in our way. So this is where the shadow work and working through all those blockages comes in. Sometimes, like, the reason why I even teach a class like this in the first place is that when I started my coven, there would be a lot of people who would show up and they want to learn how to do spells. It's like the first thing they want to learn. And I'm like, hold on, because there's things that we want to talk about first. There's no reason as a novice you can't dive in and start doing spell work, but you're going to do it better if you go through all the layers of this first. So your shadow work is what is going to undo the doubt, the negative thinking, all of that, which is going to make your spells more productive. But in the meantime, as you're working through it, you absolutely can do your spells, and you'll get better at it as you kind of do them in tandem with your shadow work. So you said trying to manifest abundance, particularly financial. I'm actually going to use that as an example in key number 10, I think. So I will get back to that about the idea of abundance, financial abundance. Okay, but my best advice to you would be to continue to do your spell work, but make sure you're in your shadow work and you're searching for those negative beliefs, especially the ones that connect to an intention. So like, what is your ideas about finances, right? What are your limiting beliefs about abundance, financial abundance? But I will talk more about that in key number 10. Okay, key number 6. Now this one has kind of two parts. So one part of it says that groups can often produce bigger results than individuals alone, but individuals alone can enhance their practice through repetition. So let's talk about that. Really what this key is really about is repetition. So the idea here with the groups is we're not just talking about like a group that you met with once or you went to like a public ritual. I'm not talking about that kind of energy. I'm talking about energy of a group that meets regularly, like a coven like mine. So when those people come together, and we are very specific about who we accept into the coven because it needs to have the right energies for those who are already in it. And so when a group comes together and they work together all the time and they're used to hearing the same words repeated over and over, it causes something inside of them to click. So this is why in my coven, we would always cast the circle the same way, call the quarters the same way. There's a whole set of things that are always done the same way. And it's because of that repetition, because what it does is it allows the unconscious mind to kind of like click into that flow state, like something just like magical happens when we have that repetition going. So when you work alone, you also want to think about that repetition. So think about, at least especially when you're first starting out, is casting the circle in the same way, calling the quarters in the same way. Use the same incense, use the same candles. We would always use the same quarter candles and god and goddess candles. Use the same, if you use music to get you into the state, have a song that you play or an album that you play through the duration of the ritual, but it's the same one every time. Wear the same clothing, have an outfit that you only wear to ritual and you don't wear in the mundane world. So these things can absolutely amplify your spell work greatly if you try this repetition. So if you're having trouble with your spell work, this is what be one thing I would often recommend to people is like, have you tried repetition? Don't have it be so scattered and so different every time. There's no awards here for like creativity and novelty when it comes to magic. It's like we want to do the magic that gets the job done. And often the magic that gets the job done is the one that was repeated over and over, or the kind that is so familiar that the mind just immediately is like, the unconscious mind immediately knows what to expect next. That's really the key here. Now, key number 7 is about mental conditioning. So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but our mental conditioning is really what facilitates our magic. So the real key here is your own ability to relax. So you want to ask yourself, how relaxed are you? Are you a pretty relaxed person? Are you kind of high strung? I'm a little high strung sometimes, I have some anxiety, so I have to work hard to make sure that I am relaxing, and that is going to help me in my spell work. Stress is the number one thing that will hinder our abilities. So I just wanted to tell you a story about something that happened in the coven once, and how the ramifications of the spell work that was done because of that. So we had a member who came in, and she was coming from another job, and so she had been working for 12 or some hours already, and she had drank like 5 cups of coffee before she got to the ritual. And then she got to the ritual space where and she got there kind of late too, so rushing in and kind of frantic. And the energy really kind of threw everybody off, and it was definitely, I would say, like not one of our better rituals because of that. So we want to be careful about our scattered energy and the state of mind that we're in, especially if we're working with other people, but this goes for when we're working individually alone as well. So if you don't feel well, if you're too tired, if you are emotionally or physically just not feeling your best, I honestly say to hold off on the spell work. If it's a full moon and you feel like shit, it's okay to do the spell the next day when you're feeling better. I think as far when it comes to magic, it's more important how you are, the state you're in, than you timing it to, some kind of lunar or solar cycles perfectly. So what we're looking for most of the time, I shouldn't even say most of the time, we're really looking for all the time, is try to get into the alpha state when we're doing any type of magical working. This is because the alpha state will allow us to have a deeper connection with the unconscious, which is, again, is what is connecting to that etheric plane. So if you can enter that alpha state before your magical workings, you will find that you have more success. So not rushing into the ritual on 5 cups of caffeine, like that, right? We want to like get into that alpha state. So if you find that you're a little amped up, try to do something that's going to bring you down. Grounding tree meditation, some very calming breath work, like a counted breath pattern where you inhale for 4 beats and maybe you exhale for 8 beats or 6 or 8. Whenever we extend the exhale, we immediately bring the central nervous system down. It's very quick. Light meditation, third eye exercises, something that is going to put you into a more receptive state and get you closer to alpha is going to be your best bet. So if you find that you're kind of stressed out and a little amped up before the ritual, try that. And if it still doesn't work, that's where I might postpone it for a day or two. This is also why having a daily spiritual practice or a nearly daily spiritual practice is important, because honestly, if you get used to doing those kinds of things all the time, it trains your mind that like at this point, I can pretty much close my eyes and know that I'm an alpha. And that's just because I've been training my mind for years through a daily practice. So this is why there really is a lot to be said about kind of setting up some kind of daily practice where you're doing some energy work or some meditation or breath work or something every day or nearly every day. All right, key number 8. Key number 8. So learn how to communicate with the lower self. Okay, so we talk about the higher self. We're going to talk more about that higher self in a moment. But here we're talking about the lower self. So the lower self is the one that actually connects to the unconscious mind. So when we can learn how to communicate with that lower self, we're in a much better position when it comes to our spell work. So our lower self will communicate with the unconscious in such a way that it does so symbolically, but not through words. So when I say learn how to connect to it or learn how to communicate with it, it's really learning the language of symbols, or really learning the language of like the symbols that are coming to you from the outside world or through your dreams, and the symbols that you might use in your own spell work. So this lower self tends to respond more to emotional content, to dramas, to gestures. So this is why during our magical practice, absolutely, you could just sit there still and have everything going on in your mind. But this is why we draw, the invoking pentagram. This is why we sweep the athame around the circle when we're drawing the circle. This is why we light herbs on fire and put something in a cauldron, because that lower self really does respond to the drama and the gestures. It's like, if you want to think about it, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's your inner child, because it's not. Your lower self is definitely not your inner child, but it speaks in a way and it likes the things that a child, it's more childlike in its desires and the things that it responds to. So anything that you can do that kind of would like interest that lower self means you are going to be better able to communicate with it, and therefore have a better ability to connect to that unconscious mind and the etheric plane. So the other thing that I will mention here is memorization. So if you can memorize the things that you're doing, so let's say you wrote a chant, or let's say there's a spell that you found, maybe you didn't even write it, you found it in a book, you're going to be better off if you can try to memorize that, or at least just kind of go off the cuff, and maybe you don't say it perfectly, but you say something from your heart. That's going to be a lot better than if you have your head buried in that book as you're reading it. Because here's the deal. When we memorize something, we actually shut off the left hemisphere of the brain. So when we don't have it memorized and you have to read it and you have to think about it, your left hemisphere of your brain is operational, right? And that's where the critic is, and the critic and all of the self-doubt and everything like that. So if we memorize it, we basically bypass that whole part that can kind of undo what we're doing. So if your mind can kind of become a little bit partially detached from what it is thinking about, or the meaning of the words, right, or analyzing the meanings of them or anything like that, what you do is you tap into the pure emotional and energy of those words. And this is what lower self responds to. This moves you more into the flow state. And for many people, this can be a big key that helps them with their spell work. So I always recommend trying to like memorize it, or kind of go off the cuff. Try to trust yourself. You don't have to say exactly what's in the spell book. Just speak to the universe. Use that as a guideline if you're unable to memorize it. But at least try not to just read it from the book if you can help it. Okay, key number 9. Magic will take the path of least resistance. So this is something important to consider. So given a choice, magic will also always take the path that is the quickest and the easiest. So let's think about it. So it's easier to change your mind than it is to change someone else's mind. Okay, so this is sort of like a pyramid or like a hierarchy. So the easiest magic we can do is the magic that will change our own mind. Now, after that, it's easier to change minds than it is to change matter or energy, like physical matter. And after that, it's easier to change matter and energy than it is to change the laws of the universe or physics. And we're not going to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to change physics, probably. But we might be able to change the matter in our bodies or something like that. But let's go all the way back to the beginning. It's easier to change your mind than it is to do anything at all. So when you consider your intention, what is the path of least resistance? So just really think about any intention that you have, and could you somehow write that intention so that it becomes a mental thing, something that you can change, right, about yourself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that idea of financial abundance in a moment, but if I were working with the intention of financial abundance, I might start there, right at the bottom of the pyramid, because it's going to be easier for me to change my mind than to change other people's minds, right? So like a spell to get somebody to give me money is different than me changing my perceptions about my ability to actually draw in money. So just something to consider with any intention. It's going to be different for any intention that you have, but it's something definitely to consider, is what's the path of least resistance to get that intention to manifest. And then finally, that brings us to key number 10. So key number 10, understand the difference between your will and true will. Now, Aleister Crowley said, and this is one of the best definitions of magic that, and many people will recite this over and over and over again. So he said, magic is the art and science of causing changes to occur in conformity with the will. So I'm going to say it one more time. So magic is the art and science of causing changes to occur in conformity of will. Now, many people over the years have misunderstood what Aleister Crowley meant. And if you look in his writings, he goes on to say by will, he did not mean just your regular old will. He meant the true will. So this is not simply something that we just want. Crowley believed that the magician who is not aware of their true will was a magician who was not going to be as effective in their magic as they could be. So what that means is our true will is the part of us that is connected to the higher self. Now, there are parts of us when we incarnate, before we incarnate, we go through a soul contract. We decide certain tests and lessons and things that will happen in this life. And in some ways, one definition of karma is not things that we have to go through because of bad things we've done in past lives. It's just simply lessons that we didn't pass in a past life. So it's like kind of like a course. Like if you didn't pass calculus, you take it again the next semester. So it's like if you didn't accomplish the task or the goal or pass the test in one life, you will have to repeat it in some ways or change it or do something different in this life. So our higher self is the one who knows all of that about us. Now we come in and we incarnate into this world and we don't necessarily know all of that. And so that's why self-actualization or self-improvement, any program that helps you do that, is very useful, like shadow work, because you start to connect to that higher self and you start to understand when your will and your true will are not aligned. Now there is a writer, and his name is Michael Nelson. He wrote a book called The Destiny of Souls, among other books. Now, what he said is when we incarnate, we bring like a part of our soul into this world, and another part exists out in the ether, and that is the higher self. And we are constantly seeking to connect to that higher self because it has the answers that we need to make sure we're doing a good job in this incarnation. Now, this higher self is really the one that understands that true will. So what Crowley was saying is we really need to understand what is it, what is our soul contract about, what are our life lessons about, like what are we here for. That's going to better make us understand the true will. So let me talk for a moment about this idea of financial abundance, just as an intention, so you can see what I mean here. So let's suppose that a person has work to do around finances, around feeling stability and security, financially abundant. Okay, so this could be something that goes on lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And I will tell you, from regressing myself several times and having had it done by other people, I know that there is an issue of fertility that has existed in my life many, many lifetimes. Okay, so this is not the first lifetime that I've had this issue. So this, if it's true for me, I believe this to be true for other people. The issue that you have in this life is likely to be one that you've had in other lifetimes. So if we come in and we simply do a spell for money, right, and it doesn't seem to work, it could be that there's something deeper going on. So we need to try to connect to the higher self, and perhaps we need to break through some blockages. There's likely to, anybody who's having financial difficulties is likely to have some kind of root chakra energy imbalances. So they would want to work with the root chakra. They would probably want to work with the sacral chakra as well, and probably the solar plexus, because that's where our self-belief is. So working with those lower three chakras, clearing out trauma imbalances there might open up a pathway to finding more financial abundance. Now, there also are likely to be limiting beliefs that are coming in from past lives, because remember, if this is something that you have worked on for multiple previous lifetimes, you're coming in with a set of limiting beliefs. So you will want to work through limiting beliefs, like how can I change this idea of like, I will always be poor, or I'll never have enough, or things like that, or having this lack mindset. How will we change that? So the beginning of our spell work might be all of that, not jumping directly into a spell just to bring in financial abundance. So here you can see that if our higher self, if we're here to learn that lesson, the world isn't just going to drop a bunch of money in front of us until we've learned the lesson. And we should be grateful for that. I know it hurts and it's tough inside when we're in the lesson. Believe me, I know, with my own struggles. But we should be grateful, because if we can pass the test here, we can figure out how to remove the blockages, the limiting beliefs, get over it, right? It's something that we pass, and now we are unfettered as we move into the next incarnation. We don't have to deal with that again. So, anybody who's got specific things, you can always put them in the chat, and I'm happy to talk about them. Lori said, I've done some manifestation spells that felt really positive, and then I'll catch myself telling someone I'm broke a short time later. Right, exactly. So you want to work with your own language, right? Changing your language. And Lori, you are in Shadow Seekers. I'm going to send you a message afterwards. I have something for you that I think is going to help you. Okay, so that will kind of break through some of that too. So, but that is that would be my suggestion to people is, really through your self-exploration is really get a sense of your higher self. Try to get a sense of what your soul contract is about. What are the lessons that you see repeated in your life, or what are the circumstances that seem to happen over and over? That likely is some kind of big lesson you're trying to learn here. And so jumping directly into the spell work can be okay, but we want to pair that with, our energetic work, working through blockages, and trying to eradicate some of these limiting beliefs. All right, so I am going to open this up to for a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, it's not just limited to spell work. You can ask about anything, but I will answer anything that people have. And while you are putting things in the chat, any questions that you might have, I'm just going to tell you as well, like I mentioned in the beginning, this episode was not about the mechanics of spell work, but I certainly will teach that. And if you're really interested in learning more about this, as well as the mechanics of spell work, I invite you to join us in my course called Demystifying and Deepening Witchcraft. I believe at this point it's starting on 6/29, and I'm going to be doing this kind of in a different way. This course is not all put together. I've taught it multiple times in my coven. This is the first time I'm bringing it to the public. And I am going to be doing so for a very discounted price. If you're in Shadow Seekers, you get an even bigger discount for it. But even those who are not a member of Shadow Seekers, you'll be invited to join us as well for a discount. I will be teaching this course over the summer, and it will be live. You can come live. If you can't come live, that's totally fine. You'll get the recordings. At the end of the summer, I'm going to package this up, make it look really pretty. You will receive a copy of that as well. Our price will go up like substantially at that point, and then we'll be selling it. So if you join us now, you get all of this for a very discounted price. You get the whole experience. You get it to be in it as I'm working and teaching it and doing it, but you also get that final product as well. So look for more information in the weeks to, basically by the end of this week and early next week, I'll be giving some more information about that. But that course will go through everything that you want to know about witchcraft. Like I said, these are the trainings I use in my own coven. It goes through altars and casting circles and calling quarters and spell work. There's 3 different classes on spell work, I believe. There are classes on science and magic, consecrations, cleansings. It's pretty much anything you can think about. There's even an astrology, intro to astrology class that I'm including. So anyway, just throwing that out there. If people are interested in more, this is a good opportunity for you. All right, so I'm not really seeing any questions in the chat, so I am going to just tell you what's coming up. So on 6/21, that's next week, I'm going to be doing an episode on Litha, summer solstice. It will actually be the summer solstice, so I'll be doing that episode. And then on 6/23, that Friday, Coven of Midnight's Flame and Body Mind Witchcraft will be presenting our Litha summer solstice ritual. So look for the flyers about that and how you can get a ticket to that if you'd like to join us. And then on 6/28, I have TBD written on my schedule, but I think that episode is going to be on cleansing and consecrations, I think. But that may change. We'll see. All right, so if you don't have any questions, I'm going to sign off. But anybody who's watching this later in replay, feel free to put questions in here. If I've missed anybody's in the chat, I always go back and I look through the chat afterwards and see if I've missed anything. I will answer your questions then or include them in a future episode. All right, well, hope you've enjoyed tonight. And until next time, blessed be.